Today we are going to talk about pasta sauce. I know that's a very Linux specific topic. I'm actually branching out very slightly and getting into entertainment, really. Brands, clothing that this could really go to like literally any market that you apply it to, but it's a concept that actually applies to Linux too, so we're gonna talk about that too, because I just realized I can apply that to Linux. This was originally going to be a video about video games, but yeah, we're gonna talk about Linux too. So there was a company, I can't remember which one, but they hired the marketing guy for Pepsi, and they saw that Pepsi had a lot of success, making a shitload of money with this guy. So they're like, okay, we're gonna hire this guy. We're gonna figure out what makes the best pasta sauce, and we're gonna sell the best pasta sauce ever, just blow away our competition. So they hire the Pepsi guy, and he's like, sure, he'll do it. And so he makes like 20 different recipes. He makes like chunky pasta, he makes garlic pasta, he makes cheesy pasta sauce, and he starts sending it out to the focus groups or whatever. And he's not getting a good answer. What he's getting is some people like chunky, some people like garlic, some people like cheesy, just depends. So he's like, okay, well, there clearly is no best answer. So what you need to do is just make all of these different recipes and just see which ones sell, you know? So they did that, and they were like, okay, well, fine, we'll just make like 20 different pasta sauce, and see what happens. And they saw a lot of success doing that. And now when you go to the grocery store, you see like 100 different options for pasta sauce, because not everybody has the same taste. You know what I mean? So this comes up a lot when people say, if you don't like something, don't buy it. The market will correct itself. I made a video a while back saying you can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do. And the same concept applies here. Is if you don't like something, it means it is not to your taste, and so you just shouldn't buy it and don't let it affect you. Because there's a lot of things out there that are probably really good things that you don't like that somebody else likes, and that's why I apply this to entertainment. Is like not everybody likes Lilo and Stitch or whatever the fuck kind of movie. My mom loves Lilo and Stitch. I'm not a huge fan of it. This is not my thing. And so she goes out and buys Lilo and Stitch Christmas wrapping paper, and that's not something I would buy personally. Same thing with like not everybody likes polo shirts and khaki pants. Maybe I would buy those on occasion, but you may not like those. Does it mean that there is a problem with clothing uh, as the reason why khaki pants exist, and you want the market to correct itself by making khakis not exist anymore? And so I applied this to video games because there was a game that got crazy good reviews on Steam called Expedition 33. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll try it. And then I looked that it was a turn based JRPG, and I was like, oh, I hate turn based JRPGs. I'm not going to play that. It could be the best game on the face of the earth, and I still wouldn't play it because I just don't like turn based games. It's not my thing, you know? So we're going to talk about Linux now, because there's a lot of Windows tech YouTubers, even some Linux YouTubers that they'll do response videos to these Windows YouTubers, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I want to get into Linux, but there's like a million different choices. There's so many choices, I just can't pick one." And especially as somebody who's using Artix S6, somebody says, "Oh, what distro do you use so I can get into Linux?" And then I say, "Oh, I'm using Artix S6," and they're like, "What the fuck is that? I have never heard of that." And I said, "Oh, it's like Arch Linux, but it has this specific init system, and I really like this init system." And their eyes glaze over, because they're like, I don't really give a fuck about what an init system is. I don't even know what fucking Linux is. Why are you telling me about your init system? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I have picked a choice where you're just way too deep in the weeds, when you're getting into like Gen 2 territory. So yeah, it's like when people ask what distro should I use, I say, Linux Mint or something, whatever it ends up being. And so you'll hear these tech YouTubers say, I want one fast, easy solution to all my problems. I just want Linux to just work out of the box. And there's kind of a misconception that people will say, "Well, you want GNOME." I don't agree with that. I don't know if GNOME is the best option for new users because you will hear this argument from Windows users that they think Windows means that it has a taskbar and a start menu. You know, something that their Android phone doesn't have, or their iPhone doesn't have, or their MacBook doesn't have. You know, Windows is like the only thing that uses that, but for some reason, they think that's like the only way they can use a desktop, and which is valid. You know, like sure, why not just keep using the same fucking interface for the next 20 years? I don't really give a fuck. I use it too. I use KDE. It's got a taskbar and a start menu. You know, but I'm also just as comfortable using D menu for everything. So you know how that goes. But yeah, so people will recommend GNOME, and I'm like, why are you recommending GNOME? Why aren't you recommending something like Cinnamon or KDE or, you know, why GNOME? You know, and really, it's because there is no one option for this. Maybe some people do like GNOME. You know, it's like when I said, you know, I was recommending Mint. People say, why the fuck do you recommend Mint and not whatever the fuck else? You know, and yeah, you know, it's not a one size fits all solution. It is just my preferred solution because there is a possibility that you run Mint and it just doesn't work for your use case, and then we have to distro hop. You know, that's something that can happen, and that's why I always tell people is while we're getting down to the Windows 10 end of life, I know it's supposed to be over already, but supposedly you got another year. There's a lot of cucks that wanna talk about, oh, I'll pay for the extra year and I'll get the support, but I'm never upgrading to 11. You know, I'll switch to Linux then. Once 10 is just dead and buried, and that's never gonna happen because people are still running fucking XP. You know, like shit, man. Like you can still run Windows 7 from 2008. You're gonna be able to run Windows 10 for a while longer before the like all your software doesn't support it anymore or something. We're a few Windows versions away from that. It's probably gonna be like Windows 14 by the time that happens. So what I always tell people is you need to make the switch because you want to make the switch, not because you have to make the switch, you know? And when that's the case, you need to start it now because what's going to happen is you're going to be 4 years down the line where Windows 12 or 13 or whatever the fuck is out, and you're going to be like, okay, well, now I have to update, so I'm going to switch to Linux, and you didn't put any prep time. All your software is still proprietary, all your shit doesn't work. You know, you're like, oh, where do I get an alternative to this software? And these are questions you should have been asking yourself 4 or 5 years ago. This is the questions you should have been asking yourself right now rather than when it's time to switch, because you're going to start running into bugs. You're going to be like, oh, my MMO mouse doesn't work well with Linux. I'm not able to configure it. I need a Windows VM. Oh, I can't run a Windows VM because Microsoft fucked up the VMs or whatever, and it doesn't run in QEMU anymore. Oh, I can't. I can't just pipe this. I can't dual boot because my computer's too old. So now I got to buy a new computer. But then I'm running Windows again. You know, so you got to start looking into this stuff now. You got to make sure all your shit works, all your desktop works, all your programs work, everything works. And because if you don't, I mean, shit, you know, it took me like there was a period not more than a year ago where I was still dual booting Windows. I know it seems like I'm a huge hardcore Linux user, and I am to an extent, but I did actually have a point where I was like, okay, I still need Windows to do blah 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 blah, and then I stopped doing those things that I needed Windows for, and then I was able to switch, you know. So you need to treat it as a process, not as a I'm gonna switch right now and I'm gonna wipe my drive and just install Arch Linux or whatever the fuck people are doing these days. You know, because you're gonna run into these issues where you're like, oh, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. Oh, I wish I could go back to Windows just for this. Oh, I didn't back up my data. You know, something like that. And you need to realize that it'll eventually be time to switch. So when we're talking about choice, so I can kind of rope this back into the conversation. When we're talking about choice, yeah, everybody's gonna have a different answer for everything. You know, what file manager you should use, what imagery you should use, what video player you should use. All these things are things that can be adjusted, and you can install them over top your distro. But there's choices for everything, and I think Linux greatly benefits from having this level of choice. Is yeah, I can run Arctic S6. I think it's really cool. Some other people they want to run regular Arch, or they want to run OMRT, or they want to run Mint for the rest of their life, and they don't really give a fuck about other distros, and that's perfectly valid. You can do that. you know and I have absolutely no fucking problem with that. I don't care if anybody uses Artix because I'm using it. That is my choice because I think S6 is a cool Linux system. I want the power of Arch Linux, but I wanted it on a different init. This is all stuff that I chose to do. And so just kind of keep that in mind, that when we're talking about Linux, it's really kind of a bad solution to give everybody just a one size fits all solution, because then we will end up with just systemd. We'll have systemd boot on everything. We'll have run zero. We'll have GNOME. All this shit. And nobody will have any choice because nobody decided to choose anything. You know, and you'll remember from if I'm preaching to the choir here, I hope I am, but you'll probably remember from your first Linux days where you got settled in Ubuntu or Mint or whatever the fuck you installed. Bazi now, I guess, is something people might be installing. And you thought to yourself, oh, there's like 100 other distros out there. I can go try these. There's like distros coming out every day. There's distros coming out of my ass. Like, oh, I can freely switch between these and I can try them. So, like John Boldewan, for instance, he decided to go with like Kubuntu to try KDE. He never got off a Debian-based distribution. I don't even think he got past a Ubuntu-based distribution, but he started distro hopping because that's what you do. You see all this choice and you're like, I want to try everything. I want to see which one works best for me. That's how I ended up here. you know? Like, you've seen my desktop, you've seen me freaking switch between 100 different distributions. People always made fun of me for that, but it's because I'm always looking for what works best for me. I'm always trying new things, and because of that, I have a level of expertise that that people sort of not covet, but they sort of envy. You know, is they want that level of expertise, and despite the joke that you're not going to get a job for being able to install freaky Linux distributions, you do get a lot of experience with Linux, and you get a lot of experience with the different tools you can use. And so, yeah, your desktop will start looking more obscure. You will start running more obscure software because you realize that there's so many options, and you'll find that one that fits you really specifically. So it's not a problem, I want to say. Because everybody will say this is a problem that Linux has too much choice. It's not a problem. In the same way, it's not a problem that there's too many video games. It's not a problem that khaki pants and polo shirts exist. It's not a problem that there's 100 different pasta sauces. You as the consumer, you as the user need to start picking your taste and learning. You need to learn. And this is something you will have to eventually learn yourself. You can have other people help you, of course, but your taste will always be your taste. So that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. I don't even know what I'm gonna name this video. Probably pasta sauce or something. Just, that's kind of the topic, but yeah, it's find your choice, find your taste, and you don't have to impose it on others. It's cool if you want to. I'll always tell people, try Arctics at some point if you have the interest, but try Arch first because this is like a slightly more advanced version of Arch because you have to deal with different inits and different repositories and stuff. So, try all the things. Enjoy Linux. It's free. Like imagine having a hobby where it's fucking free. You know what I mean? Like that's the coolest thing ever is where you have all this potential and they give it to you free of charge. Because so many hobbies are expensive. It's like, oh, I gotta pick up a new PC so I can do whatever. With Linux, you can just like get yourself an EOS PC and you'll be fine. So it's really cool stuff. Warhammer, you gotta paint all your fucking figurines or pay out the ass to have somebody else do it for you. You gotta buy the rule books, D&D, you gotta buy all these miniatures and rule sets and shit, you know? And it's like, imagine having a hobby where you can just do it, you know, it's free. And it's free forever. You know, it's really cool. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.